so here we are, we're over in the spray bay, and to be honest, it is a big old lump, so we've had to put the cameras back a little bit. Hopefully this one over here, you can see here, should give you a few of the close-ups, but because of its size, and obviously when we've got the wings out here, this thing is a real monster. It makes the transfer we did like last time look a bit of a damp squid. So anyway, what we need to do now is really prep the plastic, so pretty straightforward for that. You can buy all those nice things like plastic prep and everything else like that. Personally, a bit of airbrush cleaner never hurt anybody. Obviously make sure it's acrylic airbrush cleaner, don't come running in here with anything solvent. Okay, but what we want to do is obviously clean out all the dust. Obviously this one's been sitting around a while, so we're just clearing it all out and making it all nice. So some of these things I can detach. These tail planes I'll do as separates. Okay, they can come out. Now I'm not worried too much about the exhausts and things like that at the moment, because quite frankly they're going to be a bit of a job on their own separately. Okay, so all we're doing here is just give it a wipe over, and because it's like an alcohol in this, it should give us a very nice, but it'll just draw out any nasties you've got in panel lines and things like that. Okay, so we're going right the way over. Now, the spray camo on this one's pretty straightforward as we work our way through this. We're literally just talking your standard naval colours over 2 different shades. So it's actually 3, but when you look at the way Navy do it, it looks like 2. There's actually 3 shades of bluey grey on here. Okay, and we'll talk about those as we get to it. But generally, we just give this a bit of a tidy over and a wipe over. And it's important to do this because if you don't, what's going to end up happening is it's just going to be a knock-on effect, i.e. your dust particles you're going to leave back here, they're going to get stuck to your primer, then they're going to get stuck to your first colours like your pre-shading and things like that going on, and before you know it you've got a real knock-on effect where it's affecting everything. Okay, so it's quite worth taking the time just to make sure you're all happy. Now, we've spoken about priming and things like that in many of the other shows, so we're just going to recap it on this one. What we're actually going to do now, first of all, we're going to pre-shade the cockpit area up here, okay, to do it in that nice black colour we like to do, so it just shows through. From the inside it looks black. Now this one's going to have the canopy closed, so we're not too much worried about surface detail. It's not like the canopy's going to be open and you're going to be looking into it. So for that, pretty straightforward, XF1 flat black. Okay, these are the colours. Okay, we're just going to pop this straight into a colour cup, unthinned, as in no thinners at all. Okay, just a little dribble in there at the moment. Okay, and what we're going to do is just spray the canopy area. So we'll just check our flow. So standard thing, we're about 30 psi, or pretty much maximum on the old compressor. Okay, it doesn't have to be a perfect job this. What we're looking for here is just to make sure any joins around the canopy are getting a spray. This black will go underneath and will spray those areas and give us a nice smooth finish between the two. Again, you're not really going to see it on this one because the canopy is going to be shut. But if you weren't and you were doing it as an open canopy, it does give you that nice effect as we've had in other ones. So we just give this a make sure we're all over. Now we've got a little bit of paint left, so what we're going to do is just check some of those areas we weren't too sure about. So that nasty seam we had on the back up here, we're going to pop some in there to have a look at, make sure it's not too bad, which to be honest it doesn't. All the others look quite nice. This one that runs along here, I just want to have a closer look at. This is where that back plate joined on. Okay, so we're just going to dry it back just by cutting to air and just generally having a quick look at it. And it does dry off very, very quick. So it's a big old lump this for quite a small bench. So we're just drying off. So okay, let's have a look, see what we've got. So you might be able to see down here, that's actually not a bad seam line join on there. I'm happy with that is. There's no misscribing that you can see through. There's no noticeable step at all. This back one going across the back here, which I had a bit of trouble pushing it down with, that one looks all okay, so we're really happy how that is. That was my main concern one, this spine one, because obviously we're going to have this up in the air, something flying nicely, and I wanted it to look right, obviously. So now we can get on with the primer. Now, we're obviously going to avoid going up the exhaust and that, but we're not going to worry too much about those. But the primer is going to go over absolute everything. 2 reasons for a primer. Primary reason is that it can actually help adhere the paint to the actual plastic. It's that joint thing between the two. Okay, we're acrylic on acrylic, but it will make it a lot easier if you was to come back with camos, weathering effects, things like that. It gives the paint something to stick to and easier to spray with. Secondary role, which was basically just as important, is it will show us if we've got any imperfections whatsoever on the plastic. So what we're going to do now, I'm just going to use a straightforward XF54 sea grey. Now you could go out and buy a primer and all the rest of it, but quite frankly I've just got lots of this stuff lying around, so I thought we might as well use it up. So usual thing, thinners is going in first. Okay, so it's a 50-50 fix mix, even fix, thinners to paint. Okay, once that's gone in, let's pop the top gently on that for the moment. Okay, now I am doing quite a bit of spray work here, so we will be endeavouring to have the spray bay on in a second. Okay, so you just have to sort of bear with me. Hold on, I'll put my paintbrush down here somewhere. Where is my nice paintbrush? Sorry, a bit of a mess here because we've got a few paint jobs on the go. Let's just use a different one. So we're just mixing it now. So we've got a nice mix. Now it's a brand new bottle of paint. And apart from me tipping it all down the side of the colour coat, which is never a good thing, avoid that if you can. That's just me being greedy and trying to get lots in the colour coat. Okay, so we've covered this quite extensively before. Alright, so what we're going to do just for the minute, we're just going to flip this onto its back and work our way through. So what we're going to do, literally, start at one end and work our way right the way around to everything. Now the air intakes is the only thing I didn't remember to do. Okay, we're making a right mess of this now because we've got too much paint in the colour cup. We're trying to put it in the wrong holder. Put it in this. Hold it up here. Okay, so what we want to do is, if you've got some sponge, ideal, which we're just checking in here. You see we've got lumps of sponge, which we usually have down in here, but I don't know if we've got anything big enough. That'll do for one. We'll just pop one in like that. And one in like that, which is more than handy. Okay, so we've got two in there. We're just going to tuck them in just a little bit further. Now these leading edges of these intakes are going to have metal on there anyway, so we can go round and take care of that. Right, let's try this airbrush again. So we just clean this off. Okay, checking our flow. Okay, what we're going to do is just turn this down pressure-wise a little bit. We're down to about 25 psi. Okay, 50-50 mix. Nothing else special about it. Okay, and what we're going to do is just lightly blow this over now, just to see how things are looking. Now we've got all this patchwork we had to do when we put this gun section all together, so we're going to need to see how that is going to look buttoned up, because obviously we did quite an extensive bit of work along this area here. And obviously you want to know how the nose is fitting. These are all little areas we really want to check on. And you can probably see on this one here, we're looking very nice. I'm quite happy with that. In fact, I'm more than happy. That's come out slightly better than I was hoping, which is always a good sign. So what we're going to do now is just work our way down over all the areas. We just stick the compressor on, the extractor on. Sorry if it's a bit noisy, but this will choke us out else. So what we're going to do now is work our way around. Primary, I'm just putting it over the joins first, so we can have a look to see how they look. If we had a mass problem straight away, we could say, look, this isn't working, we're going to have to go back and redo them. But I'm pretty sure we're going to be okay. So we'll just working our way around the model. Work our way at the end of the tail here, down on the sides. So again, little seams we need to check. Want to make sure we're all covering. Say it's a big old lump when you're spraying something like this, so we have to sort of manoeuvre it as and where we can. And there we go, that's our first colour cup of paint gone in here, as you can see. Now, things we're looking out for, obviously these doors and that, which we're really happy how they've got on. Obviously the joins we're more concerned about is how these systems lay at the back here. And I must admit, I'm really happy with how those are laid out. I know it's very difficult to see at this angle, but the actual, we've got no obvious joins at all with any of this stuff going on the back here. With this underside, which is really nice because it is quite complex. The other problem as well, normally when you go around and you're putting doors on and things like that, they can be a real headache to get these doors to go in place, but again, they seem to fit really nicely. So folks, so far so good on the bottom. This top side, again, it's quite tricky to try and show you. Let's try it this way around, it'll be better. But you can see these doors, this entire front end of the Tomcat looking really nice. We've got no obvious of it's being stupidly out of place, no holes, lumps, dinks and all the rest of it coming out. So really happy how it's starting to look. Now obviously it's going to be a big old job done for this one. So we'll get the music going and we'll get this one all primed up and we can get together at the end of it to see how it came out. Okay, so primer dry. A couple of interesting things to spot here. As you can see, I was running out of paint, so I thinned it a little bit more. Now, the thing is, when you feel it, it's ultra smooth, but you don't get as good coverage. And you can see these light patches. This is just where the paint wasn't thick, so it just shows how, you know, varying your paint gives you different effects to it. And it's shown it quite nicely on that wing. Getting a bit low, I thought, I know, we just add a little bit more thinner, so I've got enough paint to get to the end without spraying it compared to with the rest of the model. Anyway, just thought I'd share that with you. No other reason particularly. Okay, so what we're going to do is just fold these wings in a little bit. Okay, now we're going to push forward with some of the areas, but what we've got to do at the same time is a couple of little bits which will just save a little bit of time later on. So the first of these is down in here. At the back here we've got the speed brakes, okay, and at the front, we've obviously up here, we've got the air-to-air refueling nozzle. Both of these we're going to have somewhat, we can decide later on to have them open or closed. At the moment I'm not sure, so what we're going to do, we're going to take the plunge and do them now. So what we've got here, we're going to use a little bit of flat red. I don't know why I'm mentioning this, but to be honest, this is my first ever bottle of flat red I've had in 10 years of doing this, or using Tamiya paints now, and it's dried up and gone horrible. But I do have a backup, luckily, which is this one here, but I just thought I'd show you that. Some colours are like that, like the clear greens, reds and blues. I'm still on the original ones of them, and they're awful as well, because they've gone really thick and horrible, and I keep rethinning them, but there we go. Anyway, so we just pop the lid off of this. Now, spraying these in, we're going to do them just as we would do spraying round canopies and things like that, because we're not too worried about a mess and things. So we've just got the paint coming through nicely. So what we'll do, first of all, we'll do this front one round here. So we just come in here, okay, and try and, it's very hard to get it in a area like this without making a bit of a mess. So as long as you've got front and backs, that will be fine just like that. And then round for the rear here, some hose through, exactly the same thing, but there's lots of different angles on this, so we need to come across. Okay, then we'll need to flip it round to here and just make sure we're down and then up, straight in. Okay, gives us our nice red. And then because we're at twin air brake top and bottom, we're going to have to do this rear underside section as well. Just like so. Couple of good coats, so it's got a real nice strong colour to it like that. And then at the same time, which is where I get covered, clamps. What we can do is these rear speed brakes, so we just hold it down like this. Again, get them in from all the angles, make sure you come in from the sides so you get the lip. There we go, that one's done. So that will just be easier, because what we can do, we can place it down there and then spray right over the entire thing. So the same with the front. So we've got to do the inside red section of those. So we'll do those as well. Okay, so with those areas all sprayed red, and they're just drying at the moment, but you can see they dry back very, very nice, and they'll look nice open or closed, and it really will be a nice contrast with the two. I'm not going to stick those in for a moment, we'll do that in a minute, because we can move on with other things. Now, going right the way around the model, so we're looking at panel lines, we're seeing how actually they're looking. Are they looking somewhat perhaps deeper, shallower? Do we want to play with them? Are we happy to leave them? So now is your chance to look completely around the model and have a good look. Check all those seam lines, you know, the ones you're a little bit iffy about. If they're wrong now, they're going to be wrong all the time. So you can either say to yourself, look, I'm happy with it, I don't want to play with it anymore, I think I'm going to make more of a mess, or you might decide to go back and do it properly. So it's totally up to you, whichever way you want to do it. So I've been round and had a look over it, really happy with the way it turned out. In some ways, I must admit, this scribing down the back here, it's come out better than even I thought. I thought we'd have a few little rough edges that might need redoing, but so far, fingers crossed, it's all come together really, really nicely. So now we're going to move on and start to put weathering onto this. Now the weathering stage with this is going to be really multi-layered, and what will happen is as we put down each layer, it's going to build up to give us a better overall effect. So to start with, obviously we've got primer down. Next we're going to come along with pre-shading. Now pre-shading is just a simple way of putting those black lines all over everything. All they're going to do is look like staining actually on the aircraft itself. It's the only thing it actually does. What it tends to do though is set up for things like panel line washes and things like that. It doesn't make them look so blunt and so sharp because they're blended slightly by this staining as it goes through. I want this one also to be a very much a weathered and warm bird as well. So what we want to do is, although it's a CAG bird, it's going to be very colourful, it's going to be the commanding aircraft, we also want to make it look quite worn as if it's been in the field a while. So what we also want to do is give it that sort of mottled, change, tone, oil, greasy look to it on the underside especially, as well as on the top and around the back area. So one way of doing that is to actually pre-shade the panel work as well by giving it sort of mottly type effect. It will help it carry through. Then we're going to put some paint colour down onto this, its first base colour. Then we can come back and we can lighten and darken the entire underside of it to give it that multi-tonal look to it, to give it that sort of patchwork quilt that naval aircraft have and things like that. So what we're going to do, back in with flat black again. So we just give that a bit of a shake up. Again, a 50-50 mix. The reason for using a 50-50 mix and not a sort of thinner mix or something like that is that it gives us that stability. We know how it's going to work. We know it's going to how it's going to come out. And as well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much if it's a little bit gritty, because at this stage it's going to be hidden by other layers of painting and things like that. So we'll just grab a brush. For some reason we have a shortage of brushes today. So a good old colour mix. Now if you've never done pre-shading before, obviously there's lots of videos on the site that will cover this more in depth, but don't worry about it. Don't make it universal. Don't make it like a grid or something else like that. You're trying to make it almost sort of patchy, almost wonky, almost as if you've gone slightly wrong. That way it will show a lot better later on in it when you sort of build up with other layers. So all you're going to do with your first pass, check our flow, we're happy. I'm going to start on this wing area here, okay? But what we're going to do is we're trying to pick out all the real big panel lines. So obviously we've got these flaps around the back here and the joints, we've got these front edge slats, okay? And then moving around the gear, these panel lines up around the back here, things like that. So what we're trying to do is pick out the real heavy duty panel lines. Once we've passed through them, we're going to come back again and then we're going to set ourselves up for doing some more of the smaller panel lines and some more of the detail, access panels, things like that. Then we're going to work our way through doing our patching. So all we're going to do for the moment, as I said, we're going to follow this slat area down here. Remember, don't worry if it's wonky. We're just trying to do the back edge of this slat, because what it is, it's actually going to be titanium colour on these leading edges, so we don't worry, have to paint it. So then we're going to just come down the back here. Okay, and we're just going to follow it down over the back of these slats. We've got a join down here, we've got a join down the back. Okay, then we're just going to pick out anywhere that's got a noticeable panel line. Okay, so we're just going to go around these here, and we're exaggerating these a bit deliberately, just so it makes them stand out nicely. Remember, if it starts not to come through, pump your trigger, pull it all the way back and blow it out. Okay, so we've got something like that. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. So next thing we can do is start to work up around here. Now I'm doing this slightly back to front so you guys can see it. So we're going to follow the wheel well round first, because that will be a big one. Okay, we've got a couple of panel lines coming off of these. So we know we've got a join as well running down the middle of the doors, from the little door to the rear door here. And then we're just going to work our way around these areas, just the edge of this sweep mark. Okay, and then again. Okay, so then some big panel lines coming across here. Pick them up and play with them. We're going to do this riveting detail as well, but for the moment we're more in tune to worry about that panel detail. Same with these. Okay, just trying to pick these up and run with them. And remember, don't worry if it's not nice. If it's looking particularly horrible and you think this isn't working, don't worry, because you can always cover this up at a later date. So these are our major ones we're running down around the back with now. And obviously I'll have to manoeuvre myself to do. So then you can work on little ones. So we're going to stay on this little wing for the moment, just so you can see it a little bit better. So if we just angle the camera down, okay, you can see what we're doing. So these little panel lines that sort of come in the back now, we're just going to pick these out. So if you imagine, it's like post shading without the risk, because if it does go all wrong, let's face it, it could do. You know, if you're not too sure on your airbrushing, things like that, you can always just cover this up. We're just going to come along and put our paint onto it, and away we go. Now what we're going to do is just work this wing just for the moment so you can see it. So what we want to do is give it a patchy type of look. So one way of achieving that is just to mist in little patches. Okay, so we're going to put some in. I've always got the airbrush running, and we're just going to mottle ourselves around. So just keep it and do little squiggles and marks in here like this. So we're just trying to keep it very random, nothing sort of samey. Don't particularly pick out your Tetris shapes like we've done in previous builds, that will come in later. We're just trying to keep it quite patchy like this, and then go over it again and pick out some bigger areas. And all we're trying to do is just get it so it looks very warm, because this will show through as well, but because it's such a light coat, it will be very, very subtle. But it will just grime it all down a little bit. So i.e. this patching will show through, but the panel lines will be a lot stronger. So if you've got a panel line like this one who isn't particularly brave and bright, we might want to just add to him a little bit more. Some of these perhaps, because we've got straights coming off, we're just going to add a little bit more grime as if it would come off. Okay, and then that way, that staining again, it will show through with our next colour, and we'll talk about the best ways of getting them on. But there we go, that's one wing done just like that, and what we're going to do is work our way right over the entire rest of the model. And then what you can do is pick out certain areas where, certainly around the engines, you might want them to be a little bit more grimy, but remember, it's going to be a lighter coat of paint, so don't go in there too heavy with your post shading, with your pre-shading, because otherwise you're going to have to cover it up a lot. Keep it quite sort of samey all the way over, and then when we're going to work our way through the next couple of coats of paints are going through, putting the actual colour down, you can see, and I'll teach you about lightening up the paint work just a little bit, thinning it a little bit more so the pre-shading shows through and you don't lose it straight away. So I'll just carry this on. Okay, and there we go. That is our, we just fold the wings up, make it a little bit easier. That is our pre-shaded F-14. As you can see, it's looking pretty grimy and dirty. There's a couple of little things we've got to take care of still. We've got the wing sweep areas, things like that. But hopefully, as you can see, it gives us that nice grimed look to it. And as I said, try and keep it, excuse me, as random as you possibly can. You want it to be this sort of bitty, blotchy. You don't want it to be like a grid. As soon as it starts looking like a grid, you're in loads of trouble, because the thing is that will then come through to the next layer of paint. We're going to let this dry off and we'll get it on, but if it's just like a grid, it will show through as a grid. At least this way it's a little bit patchy, it's a little bit uneven, it's a little bit quirky, but that is generally underside done. Now the underside, I haven't gone massively overboard down here, because we're going to do lots of things with different colours of paint down here, but certainly you can see it on those wing areas and everything else like that. So I'm going to let this one dry off now for a couple of hours, so it's all totally okay. Get the other bits all done, got to be primed up as well, the weapons pylons, the fuel tanks, things like that. Everything else that's going to be externally shown on this one right the way through. So we've got to do rudders as well, mustn't forget the rudders, get those sorted out, get them done, then we can have a bit of a clear up here and then get on with our first coat of paint.